Welcome to the Teen Take, where Gen Z breaks down politics in plain language. I'm your host, Thaddeus. Today, we have a lot to cover, everything from redistricting in Texas, which could effectively give the Republicans an edge in the House come the midterm elections in 2026, to the new trade deals that could affect the price of your next phone or car. Let's get into it. First, we must discuss the mid-decade redistricting in Texas, which could effectively give Republicans an edge in the House come the midterm election in 2026. Every decade, at the beginning of the decade, every state draws new lines of districts following the most recent census, or redistricting. Texas was a state that followed this most recent pattern. Mid-decade redistricting is exactly what it sounds like. When a state draws new lines in the middle of a decade, Texas has mid-decade redistricted in the past, with the most famous being in 2003. In 2003, led by the Republican U.S. House Majority Leader Tom DeLay and the governor of Texas at the time, Rick Perry, Texas redrew its maps following the 2001 regularly scheduled redistricting. Their goal? To increase the Republican seats in Congress by redrawing Democratic districts. To stop the mid-decade redistricting, the Democrats at the time fled the state of Texas and went to Oklahoma. However, the Republicans successfully redrew the maps. This redistricting led to the flipping of 6 Democratic seats to Republican seats, giving the Republicans the majority in the House. At the directive of President Trump in 2025, the Republican-led majority in the Texas state legislature is attempting to redraw the map before the deadline set by the Federal Elections Commission in 4.5 months. The governor of Texas, Greg Abbott, has called a special session of the Texas state legislature. While most of the agenda concerns the Texas floods, it also incorporates the mid-decade redistricting. This move ensures that Democrats in the state legislature cannot boycott the session. If they did boycott this session, the state legislature could not convene, which would postpone the aid and response to the floods. Why? The official reason given by Governor Abbott is that the current district lines underrepresent Black and Latino voters in their communities, and all the Republicans want to do is make it accurate. Even if this is true, the GOP made the current lines and the current maps. The maps that are proposed further the suppression of these communities, in turn giving the GOP an advantage in the midterm elections come 2026. Texas isn't the only state doing or considering doing this. Other red states like Ohio, Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, at the directive of President Trump, of course. Because of this move, protests all across the country called Stop the Texas Steal are starting. In response to this move, the Democrats are also considering mid-decade redistricting. States like California and New York are among a few considering mid-decade redistricting. Notably, California, the most populous state, is considering redistricting as an initiative. If California does mid-decade redistricting, other Democratic states will likely follow. This begs the question, going into the 2026 midterm elections, what does this redistricting war mean for those voting in the upcoming election? While we are in the midst of a redistricting war, President Trump is in Europe to discuss the trade deals made this week. Throughout the last week or two, President Trump has secured deals with the European Union, Japan, Vietnam, the Philippines, and Indonesia. On Sunday, President Trump and Ursula von der Leyen, the president of the European Commission, announced they had reached a deal. The EU would avoid a 30% tariff threatened by President Trump, instead now facing a 15% tariff on most EU imports. In turn, the EU would purchase $750 billion in U.S. energy over 3 years, invest $600 billion in American infrastructure and technology, and delay retaliatory tariffs for 60 days. With this deal, the US and the EU avoid a full-out trade war that could hurt global markets and help American energy companies, specifically those in natural gas and oil. However, many European leaders are upset, saying that this deal favors the United States. Japan has accepted the same 50% tariff on imports to the United States. In exchange for lowering the tariff, Japan will invest $550 billion in American infrastructure, as well as semiconductors, which are used in nearly every device, and AI. With Japan vowing to invest in American semiconductors, it will boost production and clean energy in states like Texas, Ohio, and Arizona. The baseline 15% tariff will exclude industries like cars, cameras, and consumer technology. If this deal had not been negotiated, the price of car brands like Toyota, Honda, and Nissan could have seen a $9,000 to $13,000 price hike. Talks with Vietnam, the Philippines, Indonesia, South Korea, and notably, China and Mexico are starting. With these deals being made, the prices of nearly everything will go up, but less significantly. Now shifting to the Middle East, where tensions over the Israel-Hamas war continue to ripple across the globe, not just on the battlefield, but also in the halls of power. On Monday, during a joint press conference with the United Kingdom Prime Minister Keir Starmer, President Trump made a rare acknowledgement of the humanitarian toll in Gaza. He stated that there is real starvation unfolding as a result of the war between Israel and Hamas. This remark directly contradicts the statements made by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. In a recent social media post, Netanyahu pushed back on the growing international concern, saying, "There is no starvation in Gaza, no policy of starvation in Gaza," an attempt to downplay what global health organizations and agencies describe as an unfolding humanitarian catastrophe. The United States World Food Program paints a much grimmer picture. According to their latest report, nearly 100,000 women and children in Gaza urgently need treatment for malnourishment, with shortages of food, clean water, and medicine now being widespread across the region. As conditions worsen, international pressure is building, particularly from allies. On the same day as President Trump's comments, Prime Minister Keir Starmer announced a diplomatic, bold stance. If a ceasefire deal is not reached by September, the United Kingdom will formally recognize the state of Palestine. This would mark a historic turning point. The UK would become the first member of the G7, the most powerful 7 democracies and democratic economies, to officially recognize Palestine. The G7 includes the United States, Canada, Japan, Germany, France, Italy, and the United Kingdom, and it plays a role in shaping international policy and diplomacy. The ripple effects of this conflict aren't just being felt overseas. Here in the U.S., the political conversation is also shifting. Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, a far-right Republican known for her past criticism of Democrats who speak out on the conditions of Gaza, made headlines this week for doing just that. Flipping her stance entirely, in a surprising and controversial social media post, Greene wrote, "It is the most truthful and easiest thing to say that October 7th, in Israel was horrific, for all hostages must be returned. But so is the genocide, humanitarian crisis, and starvation happening in Gaza. This statement made her the first Republican in Congress to publicly refer to the situation in Gaza as a genocide, a term long used by human rights groups and progressives, but rarely acknowledged across party lines in Washington. What makes this shift even more striking is Greene's history. She led a campaign to censure Democratic lawmakers for making similar comments about Gaza, accusing them of being anti-Israel and spreading information. So what changed? Some political analysts argue that the worsening humanitarian crisis is too severe to ignore, even for the lawmakers who have historically aligned themselves with Israel's government. Others believe Greene's comments reflect a much larger shift in the Republican base, especially among younger conservatives and libertarians who are more skeptical of foreign aid and military involvement abroad. Whatever the reason, Greene's comments, alongside President Trump's acknowledgement of the starvation and the UK's potential recognition of Palestine, signal a potential turning point in how Gaza is discussed in Western politics. For years, this conflict has been framed in black and white terms by many leaders. But now, with starvation, displacement, and death tolls climbing, the pressure is mounting and the narrative is changing. Whether or not it leads to real policy shifts or peace remains to be seen. But for now, it's clear. The world is watching Gaza more closely than before, and the silence is beginning to crack. Shifting to crises in our own country. On Monday, 2 back-to-back mass shootings occurred on opposite sides of the country. One in Reno, Nevada, and New York City. In Reno, at 7:25 a.m., the shooter, whose name has not been publicly announced, walked into the valet area of Grand Sierra Resort and a casino carrying a handgun. After firing at bystanders, the suspect fled but was later shot and taken to the hospital in critical condition. 3 individuals were killed and at least 3 others were injured in critical condition, and 1 currently being released. At the time of recording, there is no clear motive or prior connection to the victims of this horrific shooting. Later that day, in Midtown Manhattan, at about 6:30 p.m., 27-year-old Shane Deer Tamura entered a 44-story Midtown Manhattan building which houses major organizations like the NFL, KPMG, Rubin Management, and Blackstone. When entering the lobby, Tamura fatally shot and killed off-duty officer Darrell Islam. Tamura then took the elevator to the 33rd floor of Rubin Management. After firing more shots, he ended the attack by shooting himself and committing suicide. 4 people were killed, including the NYPD officer and Blackstone executive Wesley Lee Patner, and more were injured. It was later discovered that Tamura had driven cross-country from Las Vegas and left a suicide note claiming he suffered from CTE. However, Mayor Eric Adams and the New York City Police indicated that there had been no official diagnosis. Investigators later found that Tamura had gotten off at the wrong floor. It was found that he was targeting the NFL headquarters, which was located in the same building. These incidents, which again happened on the same day, are a reminder of the ongoing gun problem in America. Gun-related deaths are ranked 12th in the top causes of death in the United States. However, it is ranked number 1 in ages 1 through 19. In 2022 alone, guns caused more than 48,000 deaths, more than car accidents, influenza, and kidney disease. The number is rapidly rising and climbing across the country. We have reached the end of today's show. If you are interested in listening to my past or future podcasts, consider going to my website, theteentake.buzzsprout.com. That is theteentake.buzzsprout.com, all common spelling. I also want to share that all future episodes will be posted on Saturday instead of Wednesday, as we are approaching the upcoming school year. Stay loud, stay smart, most importantly, stay safe. I'm Thaddeus, and this was The Teen Take.